Hello, everyone, and welcome to the August webinar for EventScan. I want to thank you all for being here today on this call, and I want to thank those of you who will be watching this with your teams in the weeks to follow, as we will be recording today's webinar, and it will be available for viewing, I would say, within the next week. It's been pretty crazy around here, very busy, but it is a high priority to us to record this webinar and have it available for you. So let's get started. So today we will be speaking about rapid testing for live events, and we will be going over COVID-19 updates as of this week. Actually, we've been updating this webinar presentation quite a few times over the past couple of days as there has been some new developments. I do want to start by thanking our Texas partners. We have a large amount of attendees today who are based in Texas, and we also have quite a few companies based in Texas who will be watching this webinar this afternoon during some scheduled private viewings where I will be answering in a Q&A session. So if you do find that that would be helpful to your company to have a one-on-one, please reach out to me. My contact information is actually in the top left-hand corner of your screen where you can see my face. And then, of course, at the end of the webinar, my screen will be expanded and you'll be able to read that a little bit better. But our Texas partners, which I cannot tell you how thankful I am for these two companies, the first being Allied Mobile Services. I recommend checking them out, visiting them online. They specialize in post-disaster workplace and community integration. And then I also want to thank Elegant and Elegant Transportation, a Texas-based transportation company who works with many of you who are on this call today. And we do have some exciting news to announce with them in the upcoming week. And I'll be giving you a preview in just a few moments. So some of you who are on the call today don't know me. You're not familiar with me. Others have known me for over a decade. So I thought it would be appropriate today to start with an introduction. I have been hosting these webinars for ILD and EventScan for a couple of months now. So again, some of you are familiar with me, but let me just take you down a very short recap of who I am and you know what I've been involved in over the past 15 to 16 years. So real quickly, I do have a Bachelor of Science in Marketing and a minor in Business Management. I will not share the date of when I acquired those. That would age me, but I do want to share with you that I do have you know, those studies completed. I also attended the master's degree program for the AOMA, or as we call it, OMA, Graduate School of Integrative Medicine. Some of you on the call today who've known me for a long time do not know that. I worked for Travelocity and Expedia for 2 years, working with their marketing development in their checkout system when it was a new thing to integrate your social media account. And that was an exciting time. And again, I do not want to age myself. And then I've been with Intelligent Lighting Design, also known as ILD, for over 13 years. When it comes to COVID-19, I've completed quite a few trainings and certifications, and I want to share this with you because what we're going to be talking about today, rapid testing, is a rather diverse subject to go over. It's an ever-changing, moving target, COVID-19. So I want to share with you a little bit of my background on that subject. I am a certified COVID-19 prevention officer. I completed my contact tracing certification with Johns Hopkins University about a month and a half ago. I highly recommend their courses. And most recently, I completed my studies with Stanford University and am a certified epidemic specialist. Currently, I just wrapped up my certification in thermography through ITC. As you know, EventScan does offer thermal scanning stations. We have been reviewing thermal scanning and the technology around thermal scanning over the past couple of months. And if you have any interest in that type of technology, I do invite you to watch past webinars where you can learn more. But today we will not be focused on that. We will be talking about rapid testing. So the question is, how is rapid testing bringing back the event industry? That's a very powerful statement to make. And many people have been asking me questions this week saying, how can you say that rapid testing is bringing back the event industry? That is a very large claim. That claim is made on observations, and observations that our team is seeing on a daily and a weekly basis right now. We are working with live events currently. Therefore, yes, rapid testing is bringing back live events. So let's talk about COVID-19 rapid testing. What do we know about COVID-19? I want to share some things with you. There's a lot of information out there. You could probably find thousands of articles written every day about COVID-19. As the event industry, it's difficult. We have a lot going on in our personal lives. We have a lot going on in our professional lives. And it's hard to find time to sit down and shuffle through all of the information to really get to the heart of what do we know about COVID-19. And I've put together some very concise details that would be very helpful as you venture back out into the world after this webinar, and as you begin working with your clients and assisting them with their live events. Many of you on this call today are members of organizations that specialize in large-scale events. Others of you actually, you run event venues, live event venues, and I know your concerns and I hear you. So we're going to go over this very quickly and just ask the question, what can we know about COVID-19? Right now, what we know is that exposure to symptom onset is anywhere from 3 to 14 days. This is a very important note to make, and we will be circling back to this later. Those with COVID-19, those who are positive and currently have COVID-19, are the most contagious from 24 to 48 hours prior to onset. Now, what does that mean? Onset is showing symptoms. So 24 to 40 hours, 1 to 2 days prior to the symptoms appearing is when an individual is the most contagious. And when it comes to live events, this detail plays a very important part. Antibodies are detectable as little as 5 to 10 days after infection and up to 3 weeks. When we get into antibody testing, this is important as well, because many people have a misconception that if you are currently infected, then you must have detectable antibodies, and that just is not the case. And when we get into the types of testing that's available for large groups and for live events, when it comes to COVID testing, it's important to know that if someone shows a current infection on a test, then you're not going to see an antibody detection unless they have had COVID-19 before. And we do know now, and there's plenty of research and plenty of current cases to show this, that you can contract COVID-19 more than once. So you can have the antibodies, but you can also be infected all over again. Again, someone can test positive for a current infection, but not be positive for antibodies. Many event professionals, I'm talking to professionals every day. My calendar is full. I'd say every 15 to 30 minutes, I'm on a call or in a Zoom meeting with another professional. And what I am hearing is the concern about asymptomatic individuals. As you know, as I said, the past couple of months, we've been talking about thermal scanning, but remember that thermal scanning is only detecting symptoms. You're only looking for the symptomatic fever. And there's many people walking around who are asymptomatic, and thermal scanning will not detect their COVID-19 infection, and that's a concern. So let's go into a little bit more here on clarification. So with COVID-19, there are many types of tests available. So let's talk about the difference between two different elements, viral tests and antibody tests. Many of you know this, some of you may not. So viral tests, which are also known as diagnostic tests, are current infections. That's where you're detecting current infection with a viral test. Antibody tests only detect antibodies for a previous infection. What's very powerful about the technology that EventScan is using and the technology that's being integrated into live events currently, today, and last week, and the week before, and actually over the past couple of weeks, is a combination of the two, where we can know, have you been infected and are you currently infected? And those two pieces of information are very valuable. So let's talk about the types of testing. In the calls that I'm having with event professionals, I'm seeing a large number of individuals who have the information kind of convoluted. There's some confusion, and there's some terminology that's being used as a blanket, like an umbrella, on certain subjects that should not be used as an end-all of all umbrella type of comment, and that's really around PCR tests. So let's clarify. Diagnostic or PCR tests are done with a nasal swab. There's actually 2 rapid PCR tests that are currently available, and unfortunately it has a very low accuracy rate. So the problem with the PCR test is that a few days may pass before the virus starts replicating in the throat and the nose. So the test will not identify someone who has recently been infected. That's a problem for us when it comes to live events. We need accuracy, and we need to know as soon as possible when someone is showing a current infection. PCR tests are readily available. You can probably go to a local clinic right down the street from where your office is located or your home, and they are offering PCR tests, and those are typically sent off to a lab, and they can take up to 14 days to receive results. And unfortunately, they can fail to pick up signs of an active infection based on the day in which the PCR test was administered. And like I said earlier, there are 2 rapid PCR tests on the market, but there is a 10% failure rating. Some studies are coming back with as high as 40% failure. So in other words, 40% misdiagnosis. And that doesn't work for us in the event industry. So it's really important to know that that is a PCR test. Let's talk about antibody tests. So now we're going to get into, into the meat of the conversation. Antibody tests are conducted with a blood test. So an antibody test only looks for antibodies. So if someone says, "Oh, I got an antibody test and it showed that I was positive, I'm currently infected," that's not going to be correct. If they had an antibody test, they were only detecting a previous infection, and if they had a PCR test, then they were looking for a current infection. And of course, antibody tests are not used to diagnose that current disease, and again, they are sent off to a lab for results. And if you're seeing what I'm seeing so far in this presentation, we're seeing the mailing off and the sending off of lab tests and having labs send back results, which means we're looking at a long time frame to get those results. So how could these 2 types of tests be used in a live event setting? And the answer is they can't. And the reason being that we can't wait 14 days to know if our attendees are currently infected with COVID-19. I don't think anyone would stick around in the front lobby for 14 days and wait for the event to start. So the question is there an answer to our needs? And the answer is yes. So let's go into what's called an antigen test. So an antigen test is a blood test. It's actually a prick of the finger, 1 to 2 drops of blood. It's a very, very minimally invasive. And with that blood sample, an antigen test can identify a current infection and a previous infection. Many of the event producers that I'm currently working with that have had live events over the past couple of weeks, actually accurately the past 5 weeks, are not necessarily looking at the previous infection for obvious reasons. They are, and we are, looking at the current infection. We want to know, does this individual right now have COVID-19? Are they positive or are they negative? Antigen tests are available as a rapid test. That means we're not sending results or sending the test off to the lab and waiting for results. We're getting results right there on demand as we need it. And truly, an antigen test is the preferred way to screen individuals for infection. So you will notice there's many ERs around the country, and as I said, we're really going to focus on Texas today. There's many ERs here in Texas and clinics that if you go in asking for a rapid test, they will require that you have to be symptomatic or you have to be a high-risk individual to be able to get that rapid test. And then they end up, if they say, oh, you're not symptomatic and you're not high risk, then they administer a PCR test. And then you're stuck again waiting for days to find out if you have COVID-19. We've been very fortunate in Austin, Houston, and Dallas to have just a handful of pharmacies that are administering rapid tests, and huge shout out to those pharmacies for doing that, because there are professionals that need to know right here and right now if they do have an infection. The great thing about an antigen test as well is that you're looking at a very short time frame to receive results. Some antigen tests take up to 13 minutes. The specific antigen tests that we use provide results in 10 minutes or less. I personally am tested for COVID-19 on a weekly basis. And my results, and I'm not sure why, but my results pop up within a matter of 3 minutes. So every person is different. It's very individualized, but if we set the expectation for 10 minutes, then we'll get that result within that time frame. Let's talk about EventScan rapid testing, because I'm receiving a huge influx of emails asking, what type of rapid testing do you offer? What type of tests are you offering? Can you qualify these tests? And those are great questions, because if I was in someone's shoes, I would be asking the exact same questions. So I want to provide that information today. So antigen tests are administered by EventScan licensed and qualified professionals. These are not, we have been known for AV and lighting, in the past years. That's really what ILD has been known for. That is still a department that we have. We still are providing excellent award-winning AV and lighting, but in the EventScan department, you're not going to find an audiovisual technician administering a test. These are, like I said, licensed and trained individuals. The antigen test does take 10 minutes or less for processing. These specific tests are currently contracted through Herman Memorial Hospital out of Houston, Texas, and Murphy Oil, which is, for obvious reasons, a very well-known oil and gas company. But these are two organizations that have chosen to use these specific tests that we are using. And we've actually interacted with these organizations and talked with them, and it just has built a great deal of confidence in the technology that we've chosen. The manufacturer of these tests recently received a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is helping with getting more tests produced, getting more tests out into the market, and essentially making more tests available for the live events industry through EventScan. So we are incredibly thankful and indebted to the foundation for their support. And there is a goal of having 300 million of these tests available by October. Last time I checked in, they're not quite on par for that goal, but they are making rapid, hence the word rapid, they're making very quick progress on the production. These particular tests have been, obviously put through the ringer as far as qualifications go. And recently, the results of the research on these tests were published in the Journal of Infection, Ecology, and Ophthalmology. Say that 10 times and let me know how you do. That's a mouthful. These tests do test for previous infection, which is your IgG, and they're testing for the current infection, which was the IgM. So let's talk about live event integration. We know what tests are out there. We know which of the tests would work best in a quick result setting, like when we need on-demand results. We've gone over that now. So then the question becomes, how do you integrate an antigen test, rapid testing, into a live event setting? And I understand it seems like a challenge, but the good news is that we've gone through the trial and errors here at EventScan. We are actively administering rapid testing services, and we've got our rhythm going. We understand exactly the ins and outs of how it needs to go about, the process in which needs to be implemented on site, and we have everything automated and electronic as well, which really helps our event clients. So let's talk about live event integration. First and foremost, when a client or a venue approaches EventScan about rapid testing for an event, we're going to talk about individual staff members and maybe vendor teams needing to be tested on a regular basis. We're going to get into that later. What I want to talk about are live events, scheduled events. So when we're approached and when we're brought on board, the first thing we do is we have an intensive discussion about COVID-19 prevention protocol and the development of that protocol. Thankfully, many of the event partners that we are working with, whether they be DMCs, whether they be convention centers, whether they are a live event venue, no matter who they are, what I love seeing is that everyone really has been doing an incredible job with their protocol development. So mostly everyone has a base foundation for their protocol. And if they do not have a base foundation, we actually have team members on staff where their only job, their only focus is to work with individual companies and venues and help them develop their protocol. Because it really helps to have someone who's been through the type of training that I have. I'm not the only one who was trained by Johns Hopkins. I'm not the only one who was trained by Stanford. And so those individuals can walk a company through the process, review the current protocol, make some additions, maybe make a little removal here and there, and really fine tune it. So when we look at rapid testing, that's the first step. We look at the protocol. So here's some of the questions that we look at, and I recommend writing these down. The questions are guests flying in from other cities? So do you have guests coming in from other cities, or are they all coming from the local city in which the event is being held? The reason why I ask that is because we offer airport testing. So we have offices at the Austin Airport and the San Antonio Airport, and then we have offices near the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport and George Bush International Airport in Houston. So if you have guests flying in, we have offices nearby where those guests can actually be tested almost immediately after they land. And if they test positive, you can elect to not allow them to travel to the hotel or interact with anybody on your team, let alone come to the event. So we'll get into that later. Are the guests staying at a local hotel? That's another great question. So, some of the events that we've been doing over the past couple of weeks, we have some locals who are coming from their home and driving to the event. And then there are those who are driving in from another city and staying at a local hotel, or again, flying in and staying at a local hotel. So that's a really important question. Are guests staying at a local hotel? If so, we have mobile transport units which can be dispatched to a hotel location for rapid testing. So for example, and we're going to be reviewing quite a few examples on this call here. So for example, say you have an event where a group of people are flying in, you have a group of people who are driving in and staying at a hotel, and then you have your individuals who are local. So those who are flying in, if we're working on rapid testing and prevention protocol, those individuals are tested upon landing. Those who are driving in and staying at a local hotel will be tested at the hotel, either in a mobile transport unit, which is a vehicle that we have retrofitted in all of the major cities. Each city has a fleet of these vehicles. And so these vehicles can be brought on site, and all the rapid testing can take place inside the vehicles, outside of the hotel, and then we can verify those test results and make sure everyone is negative for a current infection of COVID-19. Another option is in-room VIP service. We've had a great relationship with hotels in all the major cities. I won't say any hotels specifically because I don't have permission, really to share which hotels are working with us right now. But I will say that we are offering a in-room VIP service. So we'll actually come to the hotel, and the technician will come to the guest room, and they'll be tested in their room. Another option is on-site testing in a dedicated room with a holding room. And this is actually where we started, 5 weeks ago. Since then, we have the mobile units. But 5 weeks ago, that's what we were doing. So we had a testing room in a small meeting room, a small breakout room in the hotel, and then we had a holding room next door, and we were able to have people kind of go back and forth, and it worked really, really well. So we have that down pat. We're good to go on that process, and it's a tried and true option to go with. Another question is, does the client prefer to have testing administered at the event location? It's a great question. I actually have an event next weekend, one this weekend, one next weekend, where both clients, of the clients that we're working with, 2 specific clients have preferred that we test at the event location. And what's really unique about that is that one of these locations actually has an outdoor bar. An outdoor bar, it's beautiful actually, with turf grass. It's a very inviting atmosphere, and the bar has not been used for obvious reasons here in Texas right now. And so that bar is actually being converted into a rapid testing area. And it's a very unique, a very cool, modern approach to processing the guests. And we're going to go into how all of that is organized. That might seem a little overwhelming to you in the beginning of hearing this, but believe me, it's actually quite organized and quite streamlined. So this question is important because if they don't have a unique situation like that with a cool outdoor bar, we do have clients that are using, they're putting up tents outside for the testing. And as guests arrive for their scheduled appointment, which we'll get into that in a second, we're able to test them and clear them before they enter into the event or into, for example, I have a wedding, and one wedding is having us test everyone before the rehearsal dinner that's in town, and then we're going to test everyone the next day who arrives in town. They'll be tested before the wedding begins, and before you know it, everyone's been tested, and that works out really well. So very good question. So outdoor tenting or an indoor dedicated testing room and holding room, again, a tried and true method. It works great at the hotels. It works great at the venues. The venues that we're doing that with, that particular option, the testing room and the holding room are located in the front of the building. And then through the prevention protocol, we've identified a new entry point for all the guests. So once they're tested, once they're cleared, then they go through this new designated entry point into the event. So let's talk about administering rapid testing for large groups, which I've already given you a preview with some examples. So just, again, it's just math. It really, with the processing time, and even though these tests are rather quick, it still takes, for like one technician can only administer 10 tests per hour. So we have a very large team of individuals that conduct the testing. So depending on the size of your event, depending on the size of your attendees, there's a lot of different ways to do it. So, say you have a small micro event, corporate, maybe wedding, and say you have 30 people, and say you have 3 hours before the event for testing, then you have one technician and you're testing 10 people an hour. If you have, say, only 1 hour to test those 30 people, then we have 3 technicians on site who are conducting the testing, and everyone's tested before the event starts. So there's different ways to organize it. It's just getting down to the pure math of the matter, where we, one technician, one professional can only administer 10 tests per hour. We're finding a great deal of success with multi-day or multi-location testing, which I already went through a lot of this, where you're testing one group of people. It's a group that arrives at the airport. You have another group of people who are driving in. They were going to be tested at the hotel. And then you have another group of people who are coming in locally who are tested on site in a mobile transport vehicle. So there's a lot of different options to split it up. And I think the main concern that I'm hearing from the live music venues that host concerts and public events like that, the concern is, how can we rapid test all of our concert attendees when most of them only arrive 30 minutes to maybe an hour and a half before the event? And so that's a valuable conversation to have. And we are having those conversations with venues on a regular basis. And I encourage you, if you have if you represent that type of venue, reach out to me. Just reach out to me and we'll start talking, because you'd be surprised how many solutions we have. So with multi-day events or multi-location tests, and I'm not going to be repetitive here, airport, hotel, and then local testing. We do have electronic processing and liability waiver integration with our system. So if you're hosting a corporate group, then we have our standardized forms that all attendees have to sign because they're being rapid tested, whether it be HIPAA forms and whatnot. But a lot of our corporate clients have their own liability waiver that they want integrated into the process, and our system is designed for that. So that's never a problem. I have a wedding client who the groom is a lawyer, which is pretty great. And he has his own liability waiver that he's written up for all of his guests to sign on behalf, for him and his soon-to-be wife. And so he provided that waiver to us. We integrated it into the system, and they were off and running. Easy peasy, not very complicated. With this processing though, and with these forms, individuals are giving us permission to share the results of their rapid test with the event host. So that is clearly communicated prior to the event, and then it's communicated again at the time of the rapid test. Let's talk about event vendors and staff members. So let's step aside from a large group that needs to be tested, and let's talk about vendors and staff members, which that would be all of us. All of us who are on this call are on an event staff somewhere. And so, there is a big concern for our safety. I'm concerned for our safety. I know that you are too, because, we're responsible for creating these incredible live events for people to attend. And we're responsible for the production, the planning, the catering, the security. I mean, there's just so many types of vendors that contribute to an event. And, and as we know, and I'm sure all of us have years of experience under our belt, it's a team effort. And so when we are producing these events on a daily basis, or a weekly basis on the weekends, or even during the week and the weekend, we're being exposed to a very large number of people in a very, very enclosed environment. In the city of Austin, the city of Austin has permitted weddings, right? Weddings and funerals. Those of you who are not in Austin, now you know. And so with that, at that 50% capacity, for weddings, the wedding industry, I mean, you guys are the pioneers in this. You are the boots on the ground right now. You are hosting events, you're planning events, you are in it right now. Whereas, the live event venues and live event companies in Austin are really kind of on hold. And so they're, getting ready to rev up their engines and really putting together their protocol. So it's just important for us to talk about our personal safety because of the exposure that we're having on a regular basis. DMC and event production team testing. So I'm going to share with you the recommendations that I have from the training that I've received from Johns Hopkins and Stanford. And you can agree with me, you cannot agree with me, it is okay. It will not hurt my feelings. I just want to share this with you so that you have some basic notes of what I recommend and what EventScan recommends to the vendors that we're working with right now. So for DMCs and event production teams, and this does include wedding planners, this includes nonprofit coordinators, it's recommended that you test all of your staff members at least the day prior to the event, at least. And that is if you're rapid testing with us. So we have many companies, and I have an event at the end of September where I am testing the staff every other day. And that's at the request of the corporate client. And the DMC company is complying with that request. Is it excessive? Some would say yes, some would say no. But that's the preference of the corporate client. So having your team tested at least the day prior to the event is important because you need to know, is everyone negative? You need to know, does anyone on my team have COVID-19? Because if they do, they will venture into this event and they will be actively spreading and actively exposing the guests and other vendors to COVID-19. And we don't want that. So that's my recommendation. If you do not have EventScan conduct a rapid testing for you, have someone conduct a rapid test. And we have multiple locations in all the major cities here in Texas, and I will share those locations at the end of this presentation. They are on our website, and you can schedule your staff to come to an office, or you can have us come to you. But please do that. Now, with that, though, we are also recommending strict overnight quarantine instructions with contact tracing for your staff. So once you've completed that rapid test, once you know everybody is negative, now everyone's going to leave and they're going to go back into their personal life, and then they're going to come back to the event the next day to work the event. So what do you do between that time period of when they were tested and when they return, right? So we can give you advice on what instructions we recommend, and that can be talked about offline, not today. You're welcome to give us a call. We'll talk about that with you. But we're finding a lot of success by doing this, and we're seeing 0 cases reported from these staff, from these event companies after we've worked with them. So I highly recommend, if you don't talk to us, please develop your own strict quarantine instructions for your team, and integrate contact tracing if you can into those instructions. Because again, this is for your safety, the safety of your team, and the safety of your clients. Transportation services. A lot of corporate events and weddings, not necessarily nonprofits as much, but in the corporate and wedding realm, transportation services are used on the masses, whether it be a bus, whether it be a private car service. There's a lot of different options. So you want to make sure that your drivers, the drivers of the company that you've hired, are being tested prior to the event. Rapid testing is preferable so that they can be tested as close to the event as possible and know that they're negative. If they're not going to be doing that, I recommend that they show proof of some type of testing, whether it be PCR 14 days ago, something. And then I recommend that drivers should not interact with each other. So if that transportation company has, say, 20 drivers on staff, they do not need to be hanging out in the break room together, conversing and telling stories and talking before the scheduled events. They need to be separated from each other, simply for the fact that they are interacting with large groups of people. And again, we're trying to contain the risk. We're trying to contain the spread. And having backup drivers on call is wonderful. That way, if a driver is tested the day prior to the event, rapid tested, which we're doing this with a lot of transportation companies, and then they say one does test positive, then the backup driver is able to step in and be tested, test negative, and then be the driver for the event. I want to take a moment to recognize Elegant Transportation. Elegant, we're working with them actively right now. They are a partner with us, and there's a lot more to come for that relationship, but they have the most wonderful protocol, and they are, I mean, it is a company policy. They are activating rapid testing with their drivers, and we're going to be seeing more and more of that with them, and more of that with companies, you know, moving forward. Venue staff. So those of you who are on this call today for a live event venue or a wedding venue or a city-owned venue, there's many of those. The event staff is very important. Now, what we're doing right now with the live event venues that are open in other cities, not necessarily Austin. Austin, you know, is constricted just for a very short time, we hope. But there are live event venues that are open outside of Austin in other cities, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, even in the outskirts there in Central Texas. And we are conducting weekly rapid tests. And that is ensuring such a high level of confidence for the venue when hosting an event, knowing that their whole staff has been rapid tested and everyone has been cleared for the event. If we go back to strict quarantine instructions, like we talked about earlier, there are some instructions that we provide to our venue clients that we're working with on a regular basis to enact with their staff, just simply as a precaution. And I can share more of that offline. All staff that's scheduled to interact with attendees should provide proof of testing within the past 7 days or book a rapid test. So everyone kind of has their own preference. Nothing necessarily required, but it is recommended that event staff should produce proof to their employer that they have been rapid tested or that they have received a negative test in the past 7 days. Let's talk about catering. Some of my closest friends in the event industry work in catering. And for obvious reasons, they're working right there with the food. Obviously, the food is passed on to the guests. And so their well-being and the testing of catering teams is very important. So again, all staff scheduled to work with the attendees of your event should provide proof of testing within the past 7 days or show that they have been rapid tested. So that catering company that you've hired for your event should be able to show you proof of that. And if I were in your shoes, I would be asking for the prevention protocol. I want to see the protocol that's being integrated into the kitchen. I want to see the protocol being integrated into the team, like the staff as a whole, into the office. And before I would go hire a catering company, I would qualify all of that. And that's me personally, and I pass on that recommendation. If receiving food delivery only. So this is very common, with the socially responsible approach of catering right now, which there's a company out of Central Texas that actually has a socially responsible catering program where they prep the meals, they're boxed meals, individually packaged, and then they're delivered to the site. So again, verify before you hire this company, verify that their kitchen staff has regularly been tested, and then review that protocol. Because even though they're just delivering food, it's still the same situation. They're still prepping the food, and that's important. Hotel staff. So those of you who are on this call who represent a DMC, a wedding planning company, an event production company, and you're scheduling, not scheduling, but you're booking rooms, blocks of rooms for your guests, this is very important. Now, we're seeing this a lot in Las Vegas. Not necessarily here in Texas. So what I'm about to recommend is going to sound slightly controversial, but it's important. And so, of course, I would share this. The hotel should assign a dedicated team to interact with your guests during their stay. I recommend, EventScan recommends, our team that has been trained recommends that they have a greeter dedicated to your group upon the arrival of all of your guests. One designated person. One person that's been verified that they've been rapid tested, which we are rapid testing, hotel teams, either verify they had a rapid test recently or show proof of that COVID-19 test within the past 7 days. Maybe they went and got a PCR test. Who knows? You want proof for all of these people. So a greeter upon guest arrival. That greeter is a concierge. It's very VIP, but hotels are willing to comply. They want your business. So they greet each person who arrives, they escort them to a dedicated concierge to check them into their room, check them in at the desk. So not just anyone who's available at the check-in counter, but a dedicated individual or 2 to 3 dedicated people. And all of these people have been verified that they've been rapid tested or they have been tested past 7 days. And then the transportation company that transports them from, say, the hotel from the airport to the hotel, like I said, make sure that they're tested. And then all other vendors. There's a huge, huge, huge group of specialty vendors that do not fall into these categories. And they do not interact with the guests directly. Many of them are on site before the guests ever arrive, and they're gone before the guests arrive. So let's talk about those individuals, because it's important to talk about them because they're going to be in the event space. So schedule them accordingly so that they're not on site at the same time as the guests. And I'm going to add a little bit to that. Schedule them so that you do not have everybody, all of the vendors on site at the same time. Scale it out. Have them scheduled in particular slots. This is a new approach to event production. I understand it's an inconvenience. I understand this is not normal, but we're not necessarily living in a normal world anymore. We're living in what people like to refer to as a post-COVID world. And so we need to adjust to that. So, scale out your vendors, have them individually scaled out, or have maybe 2 or 3 at a time. And if the venue is unwilling to comply, then sit down with the venue, have a heart-to-heart, talk with the venue about their prevention protocol. You know, many venues say, oh, well, you only have a block of this many hours for your whole event, therefore we can only allow you this many hours for your vendors. If it's not safe, don't do it. If it's not safe, make other plans, because it's important that we reduce the possibility of COVID-19 spreading at your event. We want your event to be successful. And again, require a completed COVID-19 questionnaire on all individual vendors who will be on site. I've seen some mistakes in this area, and I want to address this. I'm seeing venues sending out COVID-19 questionnaires to their vendor contact and not necessarily making sure that individual questionnaires are filled out by the individual team members. So what I'm seeing is that they send a questionnaire off to, say, a catering company. And it's like, have you had any visible symptoms of fever? Have you had this? Have you had that? And then the catering contact is only filling out one questionnaire, even though the questionnaire is written for an individual. They're filling out one questionnaire, sending it back in, the venue's filing it. Nobody's really thinking through the process and really making sure that it's done by the book and correctly, because one questionnaire cannot cover a catering staff of, say, 15 people on site. You should have 15 questionnaires, one for each person, because the worst thing would be for a client to claim someone got COVID-19 at their event and they start diving in. They want to see what the venue did to prevent it. They want to see what the catering company did to prevent it. And I'm here for the event community. I want to see the event community be successful. So if we really kind of adjust this, then we're going to be doing a good service for ourselves and making sure that we're thorough. So I'm mentioning this because I am just on my soapbox about this. You know, require a completed questionnaire for each individual team member. Even if they tell you it's an inconvenience, require it anyways. Again, we're in a different world now, so let's make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's. And then lastly, sanitize the facility after the vendors leave if the facility is not already being treated for EPA registered surface disinfectant. If they're working with a company like, say, AVC Cleans, then don't worry about it. But if they do not have an active treatment that they're treating in their venue, even though some people are saying you cannot get COVID-19 by surface, you want to cover all of your bases. So let's talk about locations. We're getting ready to wrap up, and I want to make sure that we go over this. So here in Austin, and I am in Austin myself, we have the airport location, downtown Austin, Dripping Springs, Westlake, and the Arboretum. In San Antonio, it's going to just skip around on me. San Antonio, we have our airport location, we have a Riverwalk location, and a location at Sonterra. In Dallas, we have a lot of locations. The Dallas Metroplex is ginormous. Downtown, Addison, Plano, Arlington, Preston Hollow, Las Colinas, and what's not on here is our Frisco location that actually was announced this morning. Houston Airport, Houston, you'll find the airport, downtown Houston. We have a large testing center on Westheimer, another large testing center at the Galleria, and then we have a testing office at City Center in Katy. The mobile transport units are available in all of these cities, and we have multiple, vehicles available. And in the next coming weeks, we'll be releasing more vehicles. But if you want to get one scheduled, do it now. Don't wait, because we only have so many. And then I actually clicked through. We actually had testing locations in Los Angeles and Colorado and New Mexico. But since we're focusing on Texas today, we'll just stick with that. So how do we get started? Let's review the EventScan services. You can hire rapid testing only. You can do rapid testing and thermal scanning, which we can talk offline about how those work together very effectively. And then we have thermal scanning only. The live event venues that we're working with are utilizing our thermal scanning stations because they can scan a massive amount of people in a very short amount of time. And I really wish I had more time to talk about it, but I don't. So just schedule a time with me or watch one of our previous webinars. We're also, as I said, we are offering COVID-19 prevention protocol development for live events. That is for individual events as well as for event companies. So if you're an event company and you want help getting your protocol in place for all of your future clients, we'll help you. And then if you have a live event venue, we will help you. We're coming on site for that one. We will come on site and we will walk the property. We will outline the protocol recommended, and that actually will go on for about a week or two, sometimes 3 weeks as we fine tune it. And then the venue is ready to go. You can visit us online, or you can contact us at info@event-scan.us. Now that email doesn't go to me, so I would love to hear from you individually, which, like I said, the email is right there in the top corner. You can schedule a rapid test for yourself or for your team. So if you are an event vendor in one of these cities and you think that you were exposed to COVID-19 and you want a rapid test after an event, let us know. We have discounted pricing available for event industry professionals only, and that will be, if I understand, better pricing than what you're seeing at any of the clinics, because we want it to be affordable and readily available. So thank you so much for discussing COVID-19 prevention with us today. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. And if you have any questions or comments, just reach out to us, and we will be back in September with new developments. And I am very curious. We will be going over how MLB is doing with their season, and then we'll be recapping the RNC and the DNC conventions and looking at the outcome and the aftermath of virtual versus live. And I think that'll be a good subject to go over. So have a great day and be safe.